You know, success is a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, you say success is more dangerous than failure.
For sure.
Damaging than failure.
So if you want to actually have results, you have to be willing to get a little dirty, and you have to be willing to be strategic. You have to understand that the other side might not be playing by the same rules that you're playing with. You know, a lot of warfare is with asymmetry, not just of weapons, but also of ethics.
We all focus on the success stories, right? We hear about the people who succeeded. There's a survivorship bias there too. You only hear about the companies that work. You hear about the musicians that succeeded, the artists that succeeded. You don't hear about the person who was so stupid that they blew up their career, right? It's only going to even get on your radar if they were successful first and then blew up their career, right? So there's this bias. There's not a lot of books about failure and stupidity and error. You know, most empires are destroyed not by this invading enemy, but because the powerful empire overreached and did something they shouldn't. So, you know, it is this massive blind spot that we have just as a species, and everything is about what goes well. And we miss that, you know, the vast majority of things don't go well and that most wounds are self-inflicted. So the irony there is stupidity is also self-perpetuating because we don't learn the lessons from it because it's obscured from us.
I knew how hard it was to get there, and I knew each time I write a book, it could fail. You know, even at this point, I still think my books are going to fail.
Unlike you, I did not have any success in my life until I was essentially 38 years old. And prior to that, I had a lot of very painful experiences. I kind of wandered my way through the work world.
You know, my parents were starting to get really worried about their son, right? I had 50 different jobs. I had never worked more than 11 months at one job.
And I was sort of entered the work world out of college with all of these silly illusions about people, about success, about who I was. And slowly they all got knocked down one by one. And it was very painful and very emotional, and it caused me a lot of drama, and it probably set me back several years. Although in the end, it gave me all the material for the 48 Laws of Power. And what I sort of learned from all of that crap that occurred to me was that really what I needed to forge was kind of this realistic outlook on life, where I get rid of all the bullshit, all the things that you learned in university, all the bad ideas that you got from your parents, all the bad ideas that you get from your peers. And you're able to look at the world relatively objectively, and I mean relatively. And it doesn't mean that life becomes this kind of boring, gray world. It actually becomes more exciting and fulfilling. And so I learned that the hard way, with that kind of realistic attitude, which I was forged through a lot of battle, really what allowed me to write the 48 Laws of Power.
And so that taught me a lot about focus and concentration. Once I was given the chance to write the 48 Laws of Power, and believe me, before that I was a very depressed young man. I even had moments that I was suicidal. And I got that opportunity. I'm not going to let go of this. There's nothing else that's more important to me in life. I'm going to make it's get rich or die trying, to quote 50, right? Sure. And so I put everything into it. And once that worked, it was like entering Aladdin's cave, or whatever that thing is called. It was fantastic. I could work for myself. I'm not going to let that go. I'm not going to let people distract me. I'm not going to let people come in and say, Robert, can you start helping me with this other project that will earn you lots of money, but that isn't what I'm really excited about? I got like fascistic about it. I love those hours with myself writing books. Right now, because I can't swim and I can't hike and I can't run, those 4 hours when I'm in my office writing my new book, it's like bliss for me. And I'm not going to let anybody interrupt that, not even you.
It's true in writing, but I think it's true in a lot of forms of life. Is like you get really good at something, you become successful at that thing, and now all of a sudden you have a lot of demands on your time that take you away from that thing, which is the main, not just the source of fulfillment for you, but also the driver of your actual success. So I know a lot of writers who don't have time to write because they're speaking or traveling or consulting or they're designing their vacation home or whatever. You know, there's all these things that come up, and this is true for CEOs, right? You're asked to be on this charitable board, and then people want you to invest in these other companies, and then you have these, all of a sudden you're not actually sitting there thinking about what's our 5-year plan, what's our 10-year plan, what's the thing that's going to destroy us, what's the next big idea. And so it's this process in life of, as you get good at something, the world almost conspires to make you weaker at that thing, and you have to have an immense amount of discipline and will, and you also have to have a deep love of that thing. So you find, someone's a great comedian, they become successful in Hollywood. Now Hollywood wants them to act, and their actual act atrophies because they're not getting up on stage.
They have to be a director and then a producer and then
So if you don't love the thing, you're going to be tempted to say yes because of the money and the adulation, and also because it's hard. It's hard to be staring at the blank page or starting from zero or doing the thing.
You're not going to be effective in your actions in the world if it doesn't come from within, if there isn't some kind of inner spirit guiding it. If it's just something you read in a book by Ryan Holiday or Robert Greene and you're applying it, but it doesn't have something in your heart or in your spirit, you're going to botch it. It's not going to be real. It's not going to be effective.
So how do you think about cultivating that discipline?
Well, I know that probably one of the most important life skills that anybody can develop is focus and concentration. There's nothing more humiliating than facing a paragraph for 10 hours and not figuring it out, right?
Sure.
I know when I try and figure out an idea for a book that I'm writing, and I give it an hour and then I distract and I go away, I lose something. But if I dig for 4 or 5 hours for 10 days into this one problem, like a madman, obsessed with it, I get somewhere. I get some truth to it. And Steve Jobs, person that we venerate, he was the master of that. Unfortunately, the person who ironically created the iPhone that's driving us all crazy, but he would close his door, leave me alone for 24 hours. I'm going to think this through. You don't realize the power that you have with your brain when you focus on something simple for enough time. It's like a drill boring into a piece of wood. You got to keep on boring and boring and boring until you get all the way through.
If you're a knowledge worker, which most people are these days, right? The ability to have deep pockets of uninterrupted focus, to really throw everything you have at a problem, that's what you're being paid for. That's how you separate yourself. That's how you come up with something new. And yeah, people aren't willing to do it, or they're not trained enough to do it, and it shows in the final product.
You almost can't blame people because the world is full of so many distractions. It's almost like, how in basketball, somebody's shooting a free throw and everyone's standing behind like waving their flags to try and distract them? That's what the world is doing to you right now. They're like waving their arms trying to distract you so you miss that shot.
But the good news is the people who have practiced their free throws and practiced the ability to tune that out are the ones who can play professionally, and the ones who get distracted by that, or they just want to play one-on-one because that's more stimulating and fun, when the game is on the line, they can't do it.
Right.
So I think Marcus is saying you're like a boxer in the ring, and when someone gouges you with their nails or butts you with their head, you can't just run away crying or even accuse them of being a cheater. You have to adjust your fighting style accordingly, and he says, you can be wary of them, but you can't get out of the ring.
Right. So it's kind of a metaphor for life. So the idea is that when you enter the world as an adult, the work world, it is like an arena, it is like a boxing match. Some people play by a different set of rules. There's sort of a standard for behavior in a boxing ring. Some people abide by it, some people don't. They hit below the belt. They hug you, they do all kinds of things that you're not supposed to do. This is like human nature. So Schopenhauer has this quote that if you're walking down the street and you hit your foot against a rock, you don't go get angry at the rock, right? Well, people are rocks in your way sometimes.
Right.
And I don't mean that to depersonalize them. I mean in the sense that they are who they are, they have their own nature, and that nature isn't yours, and it's going to clash with you sometimes. And that is just what it means to be a human being, an adult, in the world today, in any world. So are you going to be complaining and blaming the fact that it is a boxing ring? Are you going to complain that people have a nature where they have an ego, where they're full of envy, where they're passive aggressive? And then in the process of complaining, you're putting yourself at a continual disadvantage because you're draining yourself with all these useless emotions, and you're not playing proper defense against them because you're all consumed with kind of personalizing the situation. Or are you going to have some distance and be like a boxer in a ring and be smart and intelligent about it, And I just think it's a brilliant metaphor for life. It's a brilliant metaphor for being in control and for accepting the fact that some people play a little bit dirty. Some people are going to hit you. It's going to hurt. But you don't whine and complain. You just figure out how are you going to defend yourself better. I thought it was like a perfect metaphor for the 48 laws.
I do a lot of reading and work in bed. I could say that my bed is one of the most important parts of my creative and personal life. I'll tell you why. One, if I don't sleep, if I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm not a good parent. I'm not a good person. I'm not a good writer. I'm just grouchy and not in a good space. I've been sleeping on an 8 sleep for several years now. I swear by it. My wife swears by it. And I was actually really excited to find out that 8 Sleep has just upgraded all their stuff and they've launched their newest generation of pod, the Pod 4 Ultra. It cools, it heats, and now it elevates automatically, and it's clinically proven to give you up to 1 more hour of quality sleep every night. Plus, the Pod 4 Ultra cools up to 20 degrees Fahrenheit below room temperature, which makes falling asleep easy, makes staying asleep easy. I love my 8 Sleep. Just head to 8sleep.com/dailystoic and use code DailyStoic to get $350 off your Pod 4 Ultra. It currently ships to the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom, Europe, and Australia. Some people say life is a dance. Mm-hmm. And he says, actually, it's more like wrestling because you have to be dug in and ready for sudden attacks.
Right.
Do you agree? Is life a boxing match or a wrestling match? Like, is it?
Right.
Is that the lens that you look at the world through?
Well, to some degree. I mean, conflict is kind of inherent in the human condition. So your path through life is never going to be easy. There's always going to be resistance. There's always going to be people who oppose you. When I wrote the war book, the other metaphor was the samurai warrior. That was a major theme in it. And Musashi talks about the stance of the warrior.
Yeah.
And it's the stance that matters. It's how you meet the adversary, how you position yourself, how you're calm, how you position the sword, and how you're ready for the attack. The attack might not come, or the opponent might just give up and walk away, or there may be somebody who come from behind, but you're ready, you're prepared, you're in the proper stance. The stance, like a warrior, you're prepared for the worst. You're not expecting the worst, but you're prepared for it if it happens. And I say that because I myself, before I wrote the book, I violated a lot of times. The stance that I was in was all wobbly. I was too emotional. I wasn't strong. I wasn't like in a firm position, etc. So
I was thinking my other favorite Marcus sort of wrestling boxing one is he says it's, and maybe Musashi would get mad at this, but he says it's better to be a boxer than a fencer or a swordsman because the boxer's weapon is a part of them and the swordsman has to pick up their weapon. And I always took that, when I read that passage the first time, I thought of the final law of the law of power about formlessness, becoming one with whatever it is that you do and not needing any external things. You are fused with the defenses or the tools that is a part of what you do. I was thinking the most Stoic law of power is always say less than necessary because of the discipline and self-control, and then also the indifference to what other people say or think. Like, so always saying less than necessary, not needing proof of someone else wrong, not needing to explain yourself, just sort of being contained with who you are and not worrying about anything else.
There's also the law about never win through argument. It's about demonstrating your ideas and not arguing. The self-discipline ones are that, and in victory, know when to stop.
Right, don't go past the mark that you aimed for.
Yeah.
Almost all the laws of power are in some way rooted in some kind of self-discipline. And the idea that, I think there's Seneca, he said, no one is fit to rule who is not first master of themselves.
Yeah.
Like you first have to have power over you. Right. For you to be able to play the game of power. And so there's this Seneca, I think he was talking about Marius, the Roman general. He said, Marius commanded armies, but ambition commanded Marius. So like if you're not ultimately in command of yourself, your power over others or over the world won't last very long. Does having command over other people and over things for too long, does it maybe even atrophy your command? It makes it harder to be in command of yourself?
Yeah, in the sense of, your ability to make the right decisions depends on knowing the situation kind of in a John Boyd sort of sense.
The main thing in the 48 Laws of Power and in 33 Strategies of War, you could be the kindest person, you could have the best intentions of all, and your decisions create havoc and create the worst kind of evil, unintended consequences. We see that play out over and over and over again in history. It's not just about doing the moral thing in the simplistic way. It was about what are the consequences? What's the long-term picture here?
Well, and that goes back to this idea of courage. And I talk about this. You have to have the courage just to decide and then to own your decision. And I think that's one of the reasons that people don't do things. They hesitate because they know if they break it, they buy it. Leaders want to have it both ways, when really courageous leaders know they have to make the decision and then stick to executing the decision with competence, as we said. But then you're going to have to own the fallout, the criticism, the consequences. You could have made the right decision with the information you had at the time, and it can still go horribly wrong. You can be morally correct and still look like an immoral person. Now with some distance from American Apparel, where for people who don't know, you were on the board of directors for many years and you knew Dove, the founder, quite well. You watched this company go from a tiny little company to a publicly traded company to one of the hottest fashion brands in the world to an unceremonious exit when the board fired Dove, and then a whole bunch of drama and chaos and lawsuits to this day. So as you think about that situation, how has it informed your understanding of human nature, power, strategy, and dealing with difficult people?
Well, it brought a bit of humility to me. It's okay to make mistakes in life, and that was a mistake.
I learned that I can be a fool, that I can be conned, that I have a weakness, that the person who wrote about con artists in the 48 Laws of Power himself was conned, was seduced by this guy. And I was brought on as basically a patsy, a tool that would be loyal to him, that he could kind of manipulate the way he wanted to. It was a deep reckoning with my own weaknesses, to be honest with you.
You have to understand Dove, who was a very charming person, very seductive in a way, very charismatic. And it's very easy to get caught up in with those kind of people. I will never let that happen again, because I learned I was burnt by it. And so I kind of identified with him, and I saw that the future of the company was tied in with him, which it was to a large degree. But, and then we ended up firing him. But it's not all bad on my part, because the act of firing him took an incredible amount of, I'm not going to say courage, but something similar to that, because he was a friend, he was close, he trusted me. But I also learned that a time comes when you have to make a decision, and the decision is going to be hard, and there are going to be terrible consequences. But I think, at some point you have to kind of come to terms with your own flaws, which I did.
One of the things I think about when I think back to that time, and I wonder why it sort of took so long. Why did I feel I was so powerless? And I know to a certain degree I was powerless. There were things I could have said, things I could have done, decisions I could have made, things I could have dug in on and fought harder either for or against. And in retrospect, what was I afraid of? Maybe I was afraid of losing my job, but that would have happened anyway. And it did happen anyway. I would have landed on my feet and been prouder of myself if I had. I guess what I sort of look back and I wonder why. You were saying that it took courage or that it was scary to do. Why are people, and maybe why were we, so hesitant to make hard decisions sooner? Why do we push them off? Why do we lie to ourselves about them? Why don't we just do the hard thing earlier and sooner?
Because it's very painful. So I can't say about you, but I can say about me that I was a friend, that I had violated law number 2 of the 48 Laws of Power. I had mixed friendship with business.
Never put too much trust in friends, learn how to use enemies.
Exactly.
It's not natural for us to get outside of ourselves. Our natural position, which is sort of what I talked about in human nature, about our narcissism that we all have, is I have a great idea. Everybody must think it's a great idea.
Right.
I think the world is this way and should be this way. Everybody should be feeling that way, it's just natural.
Sure.
But it takes effort to get outside of yourself and to imagine that people come from different cultural backgrounds. They weren't raised like you. They're a different gender. They're a different race. They have different backgrounds and different belief systems. To try to think about that and to also think about the universal qualities that all people share. The problem, if you could boil down the problem with humans into one line, it's the fact that they're always taking the path of least resistance. They don't want to put effort, and it requires effort to strategize, to think of your opponent, to think of what makes them different. It takes strategy to think of what will persuade them, what will get people to join your cause. It takes effort to get outside of yourself, to see how other people might view it. But we don't want to do that. We want to just be lazy and just assume that everyone's on our side.
Yeah, or we just want it because it is better for the world. Of course, the world should do it.
Yeah.
And that's, people do the wrong thing or act in not their self-interest all the time.
Yeah.
I love this quote, and I read it at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's been helpful to me. I think it kind of connects to what you're talking about in the Sublime book. Mark Aurelius in Meditations, he says he learns from one of his mentors that the key to happiness is to be free of passion, but full of love. I was taking it as meaning like you're not angry, you're not jealous, you're not frustrated. Like the passions, the sort of negative emotions as the Stoics
So
talk
love
about.
isn't a passion?
But that love is some sort of deeper emotion, some better way to go through the world. That of all the passions, that was the one that was okay. Love.
Okay, so love is a passion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's something that, I believe very much so, and it is kind of touching upon the sublime. But all the other passions are very inward moving, right? Mm-hmm. They're about you. Yeah. They're about your anger. They're about your frustration. Yes, you could be angry because some people are doing some really fucked up things to you at some point, right? So it's not completely you, but the emotion is geared towards how you feel. You want to get retribution if someone's hurt you. You want revenge. So it's all very kind of self-centered. But love is the one emotion that forces you outside of yourself. True love, because there can be fake love where you're really, it's just a form of narcissism where you want people to give you the attention and feed the image you have of yourself. But true love, the ability to get outside of yourself and to feel what other people are feeling, which is empathy, the highest mental power that we humans have. The source really of our intelligence is what they call theory of mind, that we are able to place ourselves in the bodies and the minds of other people. What's made us the supreme social animal, right?
To be able to think about what someone else is thinking.
Yeah. And it's not only just for love, it's also for fighting your opponent, etc., and for dealing any kind of social situation. But it's the source of all of our intelligence, right? It's the source of our science. A great scientist like an Einstein is thinking inside the very subjects he's trying to get into, right?
And that's where his metaphors and analogies often come from, because he's able to think about it. Oh, this is like this.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the source of our power. And so high-level empathy, where you're able to think inside of other people, to kind of imagine what they are going through, what their feelings are, is to me the highest passion of all, which is a form of love, and it is extremely sublime.
And it's the evidence and the facts. That's how I write my books. It's probably how you write your books. It's the evidence and the facts that tell me what reality is. They don't begin with my own preconceptions. I let the stories tell me what's going on.
And don't you think from an individual, in terms of like who you're married to, who your friends are, and then from a leadership perspective, who is on your board of advisors, who works for you, how information bubbles up through the hierarchy? I think the other thing, if our mind is inherently sort of not our friend in that respect and tries to deceive itself, it seems like we have to build systems and relationships that counterbalance those forces, so we have access to reality through somebody else's perspective. They can be like, Robert, you're being an idiot. What are you doing?
Well, that's why you read books. I mean, it's great if you could have intelligent people around you to have discussions and tell you, Ryan, that idea is shit. You're stupid. But first of all, people will never do that because everyone is so political. Everyone is so sycophantic. They'll say, Ryan, I love your idea. Your book is fantastic. It's very hard to get objective criticism.
Sure.
When you read Nietzsche, when you read Marcus Aurelius, when you read Thucydides or any of these writers, you're getting a perspective on reality that has nothing to do with you personally. Sure. Right? They don't know you. So you don't have to get upset if they're bringing up facts and ideas that kind of challenge you. It's kind of an exciting process. And I often love the fact of reading great books from hundreds of years ago that literally challenge how I think. You know, I'm reading now from my new book, Things of Descartes, who's somebody I don't like. His philosophy is very strange to me, but I'm forcing myself to read it. I'm entering his world, and it's really having a profound effect on me. So entering someone's different reality, that's what books do to you. They enrich you, and they show you that your own look on the world is limited. You can look through it through the lens of another culture, another gender, another period in time. And if you're not reading books, then you're going to probably be in those layers of illusion are going to be so damn thick you're never even going to realize it.
Yeah, there's a quote I've liked from General Mattis. He says, if you haven't read hundreds of books, you're functionally illiterate. You know, we think like, oh, I can read, but the reality is if you're not reading, what good is that skill?
You take only like a year or two to write a book. I take like 5 years or so. And, you know, I know that there's something in there that will be good for my next book, but by the time I get to my next book, so many years have passed that it's just useless for me, you know?
First off, the reason my books are faster than yours is they're about a tenth of the length. So we're running totally different rates. It's like a sprinter being faster than someone running a marathon or an ultra marathon in your case. I mean, talk to me about how do you work on something every day for 5 years? Like how do you delay gratification? Also, how do you keep yourself going when, I mean, for the first year, you're not even 20% of the way done, right? Like, I'm just trying to you don't even feel like the progress of getting closer to the end, really. How do you keep going?
Well, in the beginning, you're all excited. You're like an eager puppy about to go out for a walk. You know, you've got all of this material. The whole world is open. I can read all of these books. It's fun. Mm-hmm. Then it starts getting a little bit painful after about a year. But the saving grace is each chapter is different. Each chapter is like a book, right? Sure. So I'm writing a book now on what I call the sublime. The first chapter is about the history of the universe. So I'm reading all of these science books.
I've read this chapter. It's like millions of years of history. In
billions.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I read a book called The First 3 Minutes, which is about the first 3 minutes of the universe. It's an incredible book, very technical, but incredible. And then I'm immersed in that, and then it's over after about 5 months. And now I'm writing a book about evolution and the dinosaurs. And I'm going into the world of dinosaurs and animals and biology. Wow, how exciting. And then that's over. And by the end, I'm kind of drained. And then I'm moving on to pagan religions. Each chapter is so exciting and different and weird. And human nature was like that. You know, rationality, narcissism. How can you not be excited about writing a chapter about narcissism? There's so much material. I had so much material from myself as well, you know? It's fun. But if I had to write one book on narcissism for 5 years, I would kill myself. I would never make it.
So the diversity of it and the breadth of it is the feature, because it allows you to get excited about the component parts.
But I can tell you when you're like in chapter 5 and you got 7 more to go and you go, oh man, I don't know if I can make it. You just got to have these mental strategies to kind of get you past those points, which I'm pretty good at.
Well, I'm trying to take this out of writing a little bit. Like when I swim, if I'm swimming a mile, which is a long distance, I get tired. I don't swim a mile, I swim like 7 sets of 10.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
And then I got to do a couple more at the end, right? Like, and so what I'm feeling is I'm feeling like if I do 1 lap, I'm 10% of the way done with the set. And then 2, so I'm breaking it down these pieces and I'm creating the sense of momentum, the sense of being over the hump for this smaller component part. Yeah. And so you're not actually ever dealing with this sort of period of Paul Graham, who you talked about in Mastery. You know, he says there's the launch and then he says you immediately go into the trough of despair. But I feel like if you break things up into component parts, you're actually never in the trough of despair because you're always just starting a set or you're just finishing a short set. So right. Breaking it up is a really good way to do hard things.
And the second thing was the power of daily practice, of habits. Now I've been meditating for about exactly 11 years now, every single day. And the habit of doing it every day is just very fulfilling. It's something I look forward to, and it's really helped have a profound effect upon me. But habits of work and discipline where every day you attack something is where the power of our brain operates maximally. So this is a book that every day is going to make you meditate on something, and it's going to infuse you with that realistic outlook that I think kind of actually literally saved my life.
No, I think that's right, because, and what I found with the Daily Stoic is you read it once and you're getting the sort of greatest hits survey course of the works and thinking of Robert Greene. And there's a lot of value in that, and that's more than the $26 or whatever the book costs. But it's really on read number 2 and 3,
right,
or 50, depending on how young you are when you buy the book.
Right.
That's where the value of the daily practice is. Like, I imagine your meditation is relatively the same as it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And the power is the groove you get into doing the same thing over and over again.
Right.
And I think, so you mentioned that the Laws of Human Nature is 600 pages. So there's a percentage of the population that can read a 600-page book. But how many people are going to take the time to read a 600-page book 2 or 3 times? And the books that have really influenced me have been books that I've interacted with over the course of my life.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's something really special about the daily practice. This is what, like, for instance, daily or nightly Bible study is for certain people. It's, again, the words are the same, but you're different, and what you just went through or are going to go through that day is different.
Your books have helped me a lot. I read them all the time. My favorite is Ego is the Enemy, but they're all really great. But I struggle with these things all of the time. So I meditate every morning, and as I'm going through my meditation, thoughts are piling up, going outside of me and going, man, that's my ego talking. My ego is talking. I'm heading towards enlightenment in my meditation. I'm going, wow, if I get enlightened, I'll be so much better than anybody else. I will be the enlightened one. And all these other suckers, they're not, My ego is constantly bubbling up. Discipline, I'm always like, man, I'm so bored. I'm just going to read more about the Lakers, and I'm going to get into some trivia kind of thing. I'm struggling constantly with these things. You, the great master genius of these things, do you struggle as well, particularly with ego, which you described so brilliantly in the introduction to Ego is the Enemy? Are you still dealing with that?
Well, not only did writing the book not solve the problem for me, I then had to get it tattooed on my arms as a constant daily reminder. So, yeah, I think I wouldn't even say I'm better than most people at it. I would say I wrote about it because it's a thing I'm struggling with constantly, especially I think what was unique for me, particularly with ego. Your story is you're the sort of classic late bloomer. I mean, you wrote 48 Laws of Power. How old were you?
I was 38 years old, like older than you are right now.
Yeah, which is so different than my experience, and there's pros and cons to both. My first book came out when I sold my first book when I was 24 years old. And then it got optioned to be a television show. Like, there was all this stuff happened so young. I mean, even I think about what I saw when I was going through at American Apparel, like, none of that was healthy or normal. And it would have been very easy to spin off the plan. So clearly this stuff worked at some level, but also I was, the formative influences in my 20s were not people who lasted. I mean, they imploded and blew up their lives and burned out. And so I'm definitely having to think about that stuff all the time.
Like, who are you talking about?
Well, Dove's a good example.
Oh, yeah.
He's not doing so great.
Yeah.
But I mean, the idea is like these people that I thought were teaching me how to do stuff were in fact teaching me a longer lesson on how not to do stuff.
Oh, you don't include me in that?
No, you're the last one standing.
Yeah, well, success is a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, you say success is more dangerous than failure.
For sure.
Damaging than failure.
Particularly when you're young. And it's the kind of classic scenario that happens to hip-hop artists, one-hit wonders, They're 22, 23, they have a great hit, they've got all the fame, suddenly they had nothing before that. And it's like a drug, and it goes to their head. And they can't do anything after that. It paralyzes them. And then afterwards, if their second album bombs, which usually happens, it's a phenomenon, they don't have the internal fortitude, the discipline, the skills, the character to deal with it. So success early on is very, very dangerous.
So if you want to actually have results, you have to be willing to get a little dirty, and you have to be willing to be strategic. You have to understand that the other side might not be playing by the same rules that you're playing with. You know, a lot of warfare is with asymmetry, not just of weapons, but also of ethics. You know, like the Democrats and the Republicans, I know those people are going to rant about that, or when we're going against Vladimir Putin. These are people who have more options than we do because they're ethically not bound by the same norms that we have.
There's self-imposed limitation. The self-imposed limitations are a one-way street.
And Gandhi's strategy was exactly the same. They didn't have television back then, but in his Salt March, he literally was inviting his followers to be beaten up, clubbed by the English police or whoever it was. And that would be in the newspapers. And English people who were very liberal and thought their country was, you know, the great hope of the world, be reading in this paper about defenseless people being clubbed, and it would turn them against the empire, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's exactly what your point is.
Yeah, it's like might doesn't make right and right doesn't make might. You have to figure out how to sell whatever it is that you're selling, and understanding that, yeah, most people are indifferent as best, or they have some vested interest in not caring about what you're talking about. I think about that even as like a writer. It's like, no, not that many people like books. You know, like it's an uphill battle to get people to read a book. And so you can't just expect that because you care a lot about it, everyone else will care.
Right.
Singular moments change the course of someone's life, and thus history that follows.
I'll take it one step further. If you hadn't come and contacted me some 16 years ago, right? You wouldn't have been writing about the Stoics and had your books, and people wouldn't be reading about Marcus Aurelius from you right now.
None of these people would be here. In fact, they might not even exist. Every day, I send out one Stoic-inspired email to hundreds of thousands of people all over the world. If you want more Stoic wisdom in your inbox, you can sign up at dailystoic.com/email. It's totally free. You can unsubscribe at any time. We'd love to have you. dailystoic.com/email.